Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new, welcome. My name is Jessica. I do new book videos every single week, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 of TikTok's most hyped contemporary romances. So these are 5 that I picked that I have never read before, and I decided to read them for this video. I'm actually going to make this a series, so I've got like a bunch of different genres and subgenres that I'm going to go through that are popular on TikTok and read like the 5 top books from that category. So this will be the first episode in that series, and obviously there will be more. So let's just get right into the books. So I'm going to talk about these books in the order, not the order that I read them, but the order from sort of the ones that I liked the least to the ones that I liked the most. And I do want to start this off by saying I didn't hate any of these books. They were all pretty good. Some of them weren't ones that I think necessarily deserve all the hype they're getting, but they were good nonetheless. So the first book is The Problem with Forever by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this one I gave 3 stars to. I found that it wasn't a bad book by any means, obviously. Like I said, this one is about a guy and a girl who basically they live in a foster home together when they're kids, and it's not a good foster home, so they end up basically being split up, and when I think they're like young kids, like I think they're like 10 maybe, when they get split up, and they end up going their separate ways. They don't see each other again until Mallory, the girl, she's adopted by doctors, and she ends up being homeschooled, and she decides for her senior year she wants to try going to regular school. And when she shows up at the school, she realizes that the boy from the foster home, Ryder, goes to this school as well, and they end up sort of like rekindling their friendship. Like he was always like looking out for her in the foster home and like protecting her when the foster parents got drunk and whatever. And so they kind of rekindle that friendship, and it blooms into a relationship. And the only thing with this book was the entire time I was reading it, I felt like I'd read it before, but I know I haven't read this book. So I feel like either there's a very similar book out there or a movie that's similar or something like that, because the whole like foster brother protecting the girl and then meeting later and falling in love just like is very like familiar to me. So I'm not sure where that comes from. Like I said, I gave this one 3 stars. I thought it was pretty good, but I don't think it's like the best book ever, and I definitely don't think it's Jennifer L. Armentrout's best book. I definitely preferred her Wait for Me series. I think it's Wait for You. And I thought that one was a lot better than this one. This one's obviously YA, so it's a little bit different than the other series. But I did still think it was good. Wasn't my favorite, like I said, but it was a good book. Next was Red, White, and Royal Blue by McQuiston, and I feel like a lot of people are going to come at me for this one not being a 5-star because everyone told me I was going to really love this one. But I do want to start it off by saying I already had reasons for thinking I wasn't going to like this book, mostly because I try to avoid romances that have a political sort of undertone to them or any sort of political plot line. It's not something I typically enjoy reading about or whatever, and especially with this book being that it was US government and the monarchy, and I'm Canadian, so I don't really know much about either of those, to be honest. I found there was times when I was reading this book that I felt like I was out of the loop, like the author was sort of expecting you to have a base knowledge of American politics, and I just don't. So there were like acronyms a couple times, I think, but like they never said what the acronym stood for, and I had no idea what they're talking about. And I also read this book at the cottage with no like Wi-Fi or anything, so I couldn't look up all these things, so that was kind of annoying. If you haven't heard of this book before, it's about the first son of the United States and a prince who sort of have a falling out at a royal wedding, and they end up taking out the cake, like a $75,000 cake. They end up destroying it, and so their publicists are like, you guys need to start being seen out together, you know, being happy and not hating each other, because all of the tabloids are like picking up that there's like this rift between the 2 countries and everything. So they start planning all these events where these 2 guys are gonna go and pretend that they're best friends and whatever to like equal out all the negative publicity, like they're trying to make it seem like they're best friends. And so they start doing that, and they end up exchanging numbers, and then they start texting just kind of all the time because they're the only ones that really understand the position that the other one is in. And so a friendship forms, and then obviously they eventually start falling for each other. For me, like if this book was just like a romance, I think I probably would have given it maybe 4 or 5 stars. But like I said, for me it was like the constant like political plot that I just wasn't a fan of. It wasn't like badly written or anything where I felt like they were trying to, you know, I don't know, sway you to one side or whatever politically. Like, that's not the vibe I got. But I also felt like I just didn't care about that plot line, and so that was obviously a major part of the book, and so I didn't love that. But I do think their romance on its own was really good. Like, I did like Henry and Alex getting together. I thought they were really cute together, so I did like that part, but again, the political thing was not my jam. Next was 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tillie Cole. This one I gave 4 stars to, but I think it was maybe more like 3.5. And this one, I don't know. A lot of people told me I was going to really love this book, and you can't say much about this book without giving away like the major plot points, and so I'm going to try to be vague, but like in a way that if you've read the book you'll understand what I'm talking about. And this book, the like general story is it's this guy and this girl who moved in together like side by side, their neighboring houses, when they're 5 years old, and they become best friends. And at the beginning, the girl's grandmother dies and leaves her a jar of 1,000 paper hearts and tells her to fill them all out with her 1,000 boy kisses. Like, basically all the 1,000 kisses, like the best ones in her life, that like basically that was the grandmother's highlight of her life, was kissing her grandfather. So it's like she's passing that on to her so that she'll have them to look back on. So she gives her this jar, and this neighbor boy is like, no, you're not going to kiss any other boys, you're going to have all 1,000 kisses with me. And so they have their first kiss in the cherry blossom like orchard behind their house, and that is sort of the start of their relationship. And then it jumps to when they're 15 and they're still together in high school, and they're still working on all the kisses and everything. And then Rune, the boy, ends up having to move back to Norway because his dad has been transferred with his job. And so they move back to Norway, and him and the girl sort of agree that they're going to keep their relationship going because he's going to come back someday for her, and they're like meant to be together and everything. And 2 months after he leaves, she just ghosts him. And he can't figure out why. He finally does end up returning home when they're 17, and he still doesn't know why she ghosted him. She's shocked to see that he's back, and he finds out the reason she ghosted him, and it's obviously like a very sad book because everyone talks about that. But the reason I didn't love this book, I think, was the sort of trope or theme of this book is one that I actively avoid. Like, if I had known what this book was about, like, exactly, I probably wouldn't have ever picked it up. Which is kind of the whole point of this video, so I guess that works out. But I don't know. It's not something I like reading about. It's something that for me is like too close to home, and I would have avoided it if I had known what this book was about, basically. And so because of that, I didn't really love it. I also felt it's very similar to a lot of popular books that have been turned into movies over the past couple years. So I didn't think there was anything like spectacularly original about the story, really. That was just my thoughts. I know people are going to come for me because everybody loves this book, but I don't know. I felt like it wasn't really for me. I did like their relationship. I also felt like in the epilogue, there's a piece of information that I'm sure was purposely left out, but I don't know why it was left out, and I actually like just googled it before I started filming this video because I was wondering if anyone else was as annoyed about that missing piece of information as I was, and it turns out there's a lot of people angry about it, but I don't really understand it because it is a standalone book and it left you with like questions at the end, and I feel like if you're not planning to write another book like to go with it, then I don't get why you would do that as an author. Like, I don't know, that part just doesn't really make sense to me, especially since this piece of information, I don't think you could use it to write another book, so I didn't get that at all. I don't understand why that piece was missing, but yeah, I liked this one. Like I said, I wouldn't have read it if it weren't for this video, if I had known what it was about, but I can't say what it's about without like ruining the book. So if you really want to know, DM me on Instagram and I will tell you what this book deals with. And so yeah. Next was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and this was my first Colleen Hoover book, which is kind of embarrassing because I'm like a really big romance reader and I've never picked up any of her books before. I do have a couple, this side, you can see them right there, that I do want to get to as well, but this was the first one I've ever picked up, and so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I know a lot of people really, really love her books, and I can see why now. When I finished this book, I gave it 4 stars, and I wasn't really feeling it. I didn't really understand the hype. I don't know, I just wasn't vibing with it, but I thought about it for like a week after I rated it and read it, and it's just, I kept thinking about it and thinking that I actually did like it a lot more than I thought I did, which is funny because that tends to happen to me with my favorite books, is I don't like them necessarily while I'm reading them, but it's like a week later where I'm like, oh my god, that was the best book ever. And so this one deals with domestic violence. I'm just gonna like put that out there. I don't think I knew that going into the book, but I do think that it's something that you might want to know going into the book. And it's just, for me, the part that set this book apart from any other book, because I've read books that deal with that same topic, and the thing that set this book apart for me was the fact that the author does not go out of her way to villainify the guy in this book. Like every other book I've read that deals with this, they always make the guy that is domestically abusive, or whatever you want to call it, they always make him, like, his personality horrible, his actions are horrible, he's just like an all-around horrible human being to everyone around him, and the whole time you're like, oh my god, this guy's a jerk, like, why is she with him, like, he sucks, whatever, like, but this author, like, did a really good job with this book of making you fall in love with him and showing why the girl kept staying and, like, how easy it was, because even as the reader, I feel like there were times where I was rooting for him and I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I know she shouldn't be with him. And so I think it did a really good job of getting that message across, which obviously was the point. I will say a lot of people said they cried reading this book. I didn't cry reading the book, but I did get a little teary-eyed reading the author's note at the end, so I highly recommend you read that if you are going to read this book, because I think it just, like, puts the whole book into perspective and was really, really interesting. So definitely check that out. Like I said, this one was one that I gave 4.5 stars to. I did really, really like this one. I may actually move it to 5 stars. I'm not sure. Like I said, I've been thinking about this one for a while. It's been kind of marinating in my brain. And the more I think about it, the more I like it. So maybe it'll eventually reach a 5-star for me. But for right now, it's at 4.5. So I did really like that one. And I'm excited to read more Colleen's books because, well, everyone seems to love them. And I just, like, for whatever reason, haven't read them all. And the last book for this video is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I am obsessed with this book. I didn't think I was going to like it, to be honest. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of Beach Read. I know everyone, like, was raving about that book. I thought it was okay, and I'm normally, like, a massive Enemies to Lovers fan, so I thought I would really like Beach Read, but just didn't really vibe with it. So this one I was really hesitant about because Best Friends to Lovers is not one of my favorite tropes. And so I was like, oh, what if it's really boring, and I end up, like, hating it because I didn't even really like her Enemies to Lovers book, and I was just kind of, like, so hesitant going into this one, which, again, was the whole purpose of this video, was to get me to read books that I wouldn't have read otherwise. But I loved this one so much. It is a story of two, they're like adults in the book, but it goes back to when they were in college, when they met, and they sort of meet at their, like, I think, like, their freshman orientation, and they talk for 5 seconds and then don't see each other the whole school year, and then they end up carpooling back to their small town at the end of the year because her roommate knows him or something like that. And so they end up carpooling back to their town at the end, and it's like a long drive and whatever, and the whole time they're driving they're getting to know each other, and they start hanging out. They plan to, like, hang out in their town that summer and things, and it becomes like this thing where every summer they go on vacation together. And throughout the beginning of the book, they're sort of hinting that there was a falling out between them on the last trip. Like, they're not talking anymore, she doesn't have any contact with him. But it's, the way the book is written is, like, it starts out, like, this summer, and then it goes 12 summers ago, this summer, 11 summers ago. So you're slowly working your way towards this last summer where you know that something happened between them, but you don't know what. And I really, really liked this book. Like I said, I was not expecting it. I felt like I related to both characters, which was really interesting, because for me, normally, like, it's like one character maybe that I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. But in this book, I honestly couldn't decide if I related more to the guy or the girl. And I really, really love this one. And I think this one deserves, like, every single ounce of hype that it's getting anywhere, because it is so good. And Emily Henry just announced a new book, which is pretty cool, so. That is all the books I read for this video. Like I said, I am going to make this a series, so I'll have other TikTok recommend books videos in the future. So if you want to see those, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, and I will see you next time.